Welcome back to Razmafsar TV. I am really happy to have John Clements back on our channel. John is going to show us some techniques, and he has his student with him, Matt. Could you please introduce yourself a bit, who you are?
Me, just a student of John Clements now for about 4 or 5 years.
Excellent.
Started as a hobby and became a lot more of a passionate undertaker.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, John. How are you today, John?
I'm feeling pretty good. We're not quite warmed up yet, but we're going to try and do the best we can.
Excellent, John. So, John, you're going to, this is what you have in your hands is a long sword. Am I correct?
Yeah, Longsword, Spada Longa, war sword, sword of war, long sword. Yeah. This is a double-edged, parallel-edged for the most part, slightly tapering, cruciform hilted sword with a long pommel. It comes on the scene sometime around 1350, although Ewart Oakeshott, the great English sword expert, told me in person that he believed that the sword came on the scene at least by 1300, if not earlier, but he couldn't prove it. So the only date he could prove was 1350. Commensurate with its appearance around 1350, we have the teachings of the great Fechtmeister Johannes Lichtenauer, who uses the longsword as his foundational weapon. And this continues to be the foundational weapon for most masters of defense all the way into the mid-1500s. I believe it's Joachim Meyer in 1570 is the last source that I can recall that emphasizes the two-handed longsword as the foundational weapon. Everyone else is moving on to side swords and then to rapiers as the foundational weapon of self-defense and training. There's very few exceptions. There's one French source from the 15th century that says the pole axe is the foundational weapon of knightly combat. And then you'll see some versions are, of course, much more tapering. Here we go. You might see a version like this. Taper, much more acutely pointed, and somewhat different in its thickness and cross-section, maybe the width of the cross, maybe the shape of the handle, the grip. But for the most part, with only a few subtle nuances of how they cut and thrust, they use the same striking and warding motions and the same foundational elements and concepts.
Okay, thank you very much.
The longsword.
Just one question, John. Is there a major difference between German school and Italian school in using a longsword?
Major difference. That's a great question. It's a question that's debated. There are, I believe, differences, but major. The only major difference I see is that the Italian sources don't rely on this stance. They don't utilize this. They'll use it here. And they like to thrust more. And that's reflected in their armor composition as well. It's said that if you can use the double-handed war sword, longsword, then you can fight with a single-hand weapon. If you can fight with the longsword, you can fight with a pole axe, a war hammer, a spear, a short staff. So you're learning all of that with this. And as you're half-swording with it, you're also using wrestling and grappling techniques. So extremely versatile weapon, extremely effective weapon, as the master Dobringer says, no part of the sword was invented. And I saw use all across Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, Southern Europe, the Mediterranean, taken into the New World. They found war swords in, I believe it is Arizona, with De Soto's expedition. They were used against in the Indian Ocean by Vasco da Gama. They were used by crusaders. Everywhere this went, it kicked ass. It was never found deficient or wanting. The only thing that makes it go away is that it becomes impractical for war and obsolete for urban self-defense and dueling. Yeah. Armored, unarmored, foot mounted with a side weapon or double-handed. It's a pretty ideal weapon. George Silver, 1599, says he prefers buckler has advantage over this. Okay. But he also says that the blade length of the single hand and the double hand are the same. I'll show you what I mean. Hold on. You already got one. Here. Let's see. Random. Let's see. Yeah?
Yeah.
And because, okay, so you make say a thrust from the middle position. Okay. If he makes a thrust, just an extension. If you extend. So if he extends in a thrust, he's that far away.
Yeah.
Okay? He's missing me. But I can make my extension here. All right? And I'm the same distance away, except that I can do this. If he makes a little step forward, he makes a step forward, I'm hitting. Because that's how the biomechanics of the muscularity and skeletal structure works. I can get a longer reach with one hand. And this also applies to cutting. If he makes a cut at me, just do a cut that's going to miss. Right. So that cut's going to miss, right? And I'm not going to move, but my cut is going to hit him. So I can hit him, I can reach him on my cut. And I didn't slip my leg, I didn't move my body. So if I lead with this leg instead of keeping it back, and he does that cut, he's going to miss, and I'm still going to hit him. Wow! This is sharp, so I got to be a little careful. Preferably. So, and that's not even me slipping the leg. So we begin to see how, if you know that weapon, and you're trained in this weapon, that in an unarmored situation, this can have an advantage, particularly if I have a secondary weapon. But it's not the weapon, it's the man that makes the difference.
Of course, of course. Okay. Yes, please, John. Go ahead, please. Can you see me? Okay, go ahead.
I have an idea.
Yes, please.
When I have nothing to say and I'm waiting on you, I'll go to this position.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
And if we lose the sound or the audio, then you do this. Do you do this in football in Europe?
Yes, we do.
In America, this is the timeout symbol?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So you do this, and from where I'm standing, I have to squint a little bit to see your picture.
Okay.
So if you see him doing that. So if you do that, I'll know to stop because you can't hear me or something.
Perfect. Go ahead, please. Okay, go ahead. Oh, okay. Good. Go ahead.
So I'm waiting for you.
Yes.
You have a question or anything, or what? How do we do this?
No. Please, just okay. The question which I have: can you show us some techniques with the longsword, some combinations?
Okay. Let's cover Krumphau. All right. I'm going to cover one particular technique. It's a very controversial technique. It's something that I believe a vast number of people get wrong. They misinterpret, they misapply it, and they're missing out. And then they distort what it is that I have been saying about it for 10 or 12 years now. And what it is let me rotate the camera for a moment. Do you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so there are 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're labeled.
Yeah.
These 4 lines, I can strike them with either edge. That gives me 8 cuts. But I can do those cuts up and down, side to side with either edge. Giving me 16 cuts. 16. But here's what's cool. Those 16 cuts are all done with just 5 different strikes. And you might say, well, how does 5 go into 16? Well, it's because this one doesn't have a left and a right, and this one doesn't have a high and a low. So that when you do the cuts, you end up counting them more than once. But it still ends up being 16 cuts using only 5 different lines of striking, 5 different kinds of striking. And those 5 cuts are simply a vertical cut. We're going to go clockwise. Vertical cut with the long edge, a diagonal cut with the long edge, a horizontal cut with the long edge, and then a crooked cut, striking from D to H. A crooked cut with the back edge or the long edge. I'm doing it one and then the other. Matt, throw me the teaching sword. Then I can hit with the back of the sword. I'm going to use this. This is my teaching sword. It's something I came up with back in the 90s. It's got one edge that's white, one edge that's blue. It's marked with the 3 divisions so that there's a strong and a weak portion in the middle. And I got it from Filippo Vanni's manual 1480, in which he colors the weapons with a blue shadow and a white edge. Anyway, so this way you can see that I'm striking with the white edge, but now I'm striking with the blue edge. I'm striking with the blue edge, I'm striking with the white edge. I'm striking with the blue edge, I'm striking with the blue, then white, etc. So I can do this strike with the white edge, and I can do it with the blue edge. I can strike this strike with the white edge, I can strike it with the blue edge. I can strike this one white edge, I can strike it blue edge, and on and on. And that's how you're able to use 5 cuts, a diagonal, a vertical, a horizontal, a crooked, and do them with one edge or the other, and end up with just the 5 master cuts of the great master Lichtenauer. And many masters tell us there are no cuts other than these 5, and no one can invent a cut or discover a new cut that is not a variation of one of these 5. Okay, so if you're not using all 5, then you're disagreeing with the great masters. And if you're doing one of them wrong, so today, there's a lot of people that do them incorrectly. So, to start out, the German masters divide cuts into
John.
Overcuts and undercuts. Bullets going on. Yes?
Okay. Okay. Can you
Okay.
repeat again? Can you repeat again? Okay. Can you repeat, please?
So
Because
if I cut underneath from here, you see the line that the cut goes on. You see that it's rising up and it's trying to hit an opponent here or here or here.
right.
It's a low cut coming up.
Yes.
I can do the same cut from here.
Yes.
I can do the cut from here.
Yes.
But watch what happens if I do the cut from here.
Yeah. Ah.
Now it is no longer rising up. It's no longer an undercut. It is now, the cut is now coming down.
Yeah.
It is coming down. It is an overcut. It comes down. It's the same cut on the same line with the same edge, with the same portion, hitting the same target, but it's coming down, not going up.
Excellent. Yes.
So if I do it, if I cut from here, it's an undercut. If I do the same cut from here, it is now a descending cut, an overcut. The other one's an undercut. Switch sides with me. Now what happens is that sometimes this is going to be very subtle, very subtle. This is where I'm going to throw the crump. You're going to traverse. I'm going to traverse, and the crump magically transforms into this way. Okay, so there is a type of diagonal cut that is thrown. Well, there is a type of descending cut, an overcut, that uses the back of the sword.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether it comes vertically or diagonally. The difference is this. Okay? If I throw it to the top of his head, or I throw it diagonally to the side of his head, or diagonally here, or I throw it diagonally here or here, the difference is this. Very subtle. So the sources don't care whether it's vertical or diagonal, they just say it comes down. But that cut's going to end in one of the two positions. I'm either going to throw it and here, and cut and end here. Two different guards. And sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like this. It varies on your build and the context of the strike and the situation of the combat. But biomechanically, in terms of the geometry, that's all it is. So this cut, if I were to throw it like this and hit here, you see that it goes and comes down. Using the teaching sword, you'll see that it hits with the blue edge. Whew.
Yeah.
Okay. Hits with the blue edge. Hits with the blue edge. Hits with the blue edge. Same cut. Okay. That other cut I was doing, the crooked cut, does this.
Yeah.
And it's going to hit here, here, or there. It might hit a little low. Right? So I'm doing this. But this is what people do. I'm going to start striking at my opponent. And as I do, he's going to come forward and he's going to traverse on a diagonal slightly. Show it. He's going to do that. And instead of me just going forward like I have been, I'm going to go on a diagonal as well. And all I'm doing, instead of stepping here, I'm stepping here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all okay, all okay.
So we're going to go at like 1/10. We're going to slow this way down.
Yeah.
Of verticals. So as he starts to come at me and I start to go at him, and I'm going to be throwing this cut. Watch what happens. Okay. I'm going to miss. Right? So to prevent myself from missing, I'm going to turn my body. Clear. So I'm going to go from here to here.
Yeah.
As I'm doing this cut. But as I hit him, my blade is going to come down like this. Return where you were. So my blade is actually hitting him like this, which is identical to, just come straight, if I were to do this.
Yeah. This
cut and this cut. Two different angles. But if I do this cut and I do it like this, by the time it actually hits, it's hitting like this. It's magic. The geometry is astonishing. So because of this, where I'm going with this, is that do the diagonal traverse. You traverse. If I throw this cut like that, it becomes indistinguishable. That's becomes identical to if I was trying to do this one, but he moves, and I do this.
Yeah.
I end in the same position, the blade comes down on the same angle and hits them in the same spot. So there are people who are doing their crooked cuts that way, and they're actually doing the squinting cut. And they go, no, I'm not, I'm doing a crooked cut. And then I say, well, then show me the crooked cut. Show me the squinting cut. And they do the squinting cut, and I go, they're identical. And they will go, oh, never realized that. Let's take it another direction. Having established that, the crooked cut, we are told that the crooked cut has a purpose, folks. And it is to break the man who is either in this stance, prima, first, the ox, fenestra. To break this stance, to hit him and defend yourself in one move. Or its purpose is to break the thrust, to break the attack that comes from here. Well, there's only one attack that comes from this position. That's the attack that comes from that position. Rewind. If he doesn't turn his weapon, if he just extends, he can't hit me. If he passes forward at me, okay, he's still having trouble reaching me. I can step out, I can move in. But what we see in the sources are that he's in that position, and as he goes to thrust at me, I am told that I must step on a diagonal outside of his right foot with my left foot. We're assuming two right-handed swordsmen. So we are told I must step this way. When I do that, what happens? We're going to switch. Okay. We're going to start with the most fundamental. My opponent is standing there in this guard threatening me. He's essentially saying, back off, I will stab you. He's not doing this. Fight me. He's not standing still. He's not standing with his legs stiff and straight. He's not standing in an L position. He doesn't have his hilt behind him. That's not what the sources show. That's not what the sources describe as the oaths. Instead, he's in combat. So he's dynamically here. Bring it down a little. And I have to deal with that without getting stabbed in the face. So the answer that Lichtenauer tells us is to break that stance with the crooked cut. And he describes it as you step this way and you cut him in the hands or stab him in the body. Very critical. Cut him in the hands or stab him in the body. And the images that the sources show of this technique in action looks like this. It looks like this. And see, he's getting hit in the hands, or he's going to be stabbed in the body. And I step. It looks like this. And people have said, how the hell did his sword get behind my neck? or behind my head? How did my strong get on his strong? So they reverse engineer this. And they look at the image and they say, well, in order for this to have happened, John's sword would have to have been here. John's leg would have to have been here. And Matt had to be in an oaks position. So somehow, when he stabs at me, I have to go sideways. And they make this inane, asinine windshield wiper movement. And this is what they think a crooked cut is. Now, I'm not hitting my opponent when I do this. And the master cuts are defined as simultaneously hitting and defending in one action. Not two, not three, not four, one action. And other masters say, you will defend here and hit him here simultaneously. So that's what I must achieve to do the crooked cut correctly. I have to do that. Wow, how am I going to do that and still end in that position? But wait, there's more. Because other illustrations of the crooked cut, of the crooked cut show this. And he's in a hanging guard, and people look at this and they reverse engineer it and they say, well, for us to have gotten into this position with a crooked cut, Matt had to have been in a left oats, and John had to have come this way. No, wrong. So they're actually daring to say that the sources mislabeled the images, and that it's not breaking the right oats, it's breaking the left oats. And that's how they come up with this stupidity of this windshield wiper. Now, watch this. Do that again. So here's a windshield wiper, and they'll turn sideways. And now by turning sideways, they're hitting him. And they think they're defending his sword. Well, this cut right here is the squinting cut. That's not a crooked cut, it's a squinting cut. So they're doing a sideways movement and then turning their body and saying, I crumped him. No, you didn't. You squinted him and you did it incorrectly. And there's another problem. Before I go any further, I have to say the other problem. Stand in the bad oaks. They will stand like this and go, let me demonstrate the Krumphau against oaks. And we'll have the guy stand stiffly with his weapon behind like that. And then they'll come up and they'll go, see, I did it. And I just go, and I vomit out my eyes. And I'll say, can you do that on me? Because I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this. And as soon as you move, I'm going to go, woo, in your face or your chest or your throat or on your hands. And that's what you have to be able to counter with the Krumphau. So this is how you do it. And this is textbook. So he goes, he's in an oats. I have to do two things. I have to break his stance and hit him in one action, or when he attacks me, when he goes to thrust, I have to counter that thrust and hit him with a cut in one action. We'll start with the first. But before I go any further, I'll show this. If my opponent goes to the paddles, if my opponent does the oak stance incorrectly, I have no business trying to crump him. I'm not going to use the Krumphau against a fake oaks. If I do, I actually can't do it. I can't actually hit him. So you're using real technique against a real stance. Instead, go back to that. If I'm fighting a guy and he's like this, I'm just going to go, I don't have to crump him. I just do this. And that's where the prior action comes into play. If he does a bad oaks, I don't have to can just go stab, I can go cut, I can do anything I want to him. I don't have to work, I can even do this. But if he's in a proper oats, none of that works. Because anything I do, point, anything I start to do, he's going to stick me. And we practice doing this a lot. So in order to beat him, what I have to do is I have to do this first. Prior action, I don't throw my Krumphau from here. I have to bind and wind. All the master cuts, we are told, start from binding and winding. Binding means making a contact, not just, but a contact that has leverage and resistance. So that in the instant I get here and I press a little bit, he knows I can do this or that, and he's works. And in that instant, he knows he can't just thrust at me because I'm going to do the same things again. Now I'll even do this. So in that instant of that contact, that's when your opponent responds. And as he responds, that's when I reverse and I crump him. And I end up like this, stabbing him here, or depending on what he did, hitting him again. Hitting him in the hands. He can be hit right here in the hands, stab here, hit here. Because we have different heights, it's a little difficult for me to get him in the hands, but it's much easier for me to get him in the body.
Also hands further up the arm.
Hand does not necessarily mean just this. They show the hits on the forearm, but they don't really have a conception of forearm for some reason. They call it all hands.
I heard there's several times.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one version, but this is what happens. You're gonna go, if he attacks me first. So he attacks, then I do the same thing. Okay? And this time, he's trying to defend himself because as this thrust comes in, and I'm going to go here and do this, he has one possible defense. He can go to a hanging guard. And that is why in the sources, when they're showing how the Krumphau works, they show one man in a long point, and the other guy is at hanging guard. And I keep pointing this out. And it occurs organically on its own. The last part, this master here, Paul Hector Meyer, he says, you may throw the crooked cut at an opponent on his left side. Boom. And if, I'll go to a flaw. I can just throw the crooked cut at him. Boom. Okay. Hand here. If he wards it, he says. Okay. No, I don't word it that. Word it just a side here. So if he wards it with a simple setting aside, he says, immediately crump him on his right side. Boom. But if he should ward that blow as well, then crump him again or throw any blow, I believe he says, memory serves, back on the other side. So what I'm doing is this. I'm going hit on both those lower lines you saw.
Yes.
And remember, we are told all cuts are on that sign.